So as far as for the development of Systema, how did that come about when you went ahead and produced that?
Do you mean opening the school here,
Right.
or where did Systema come from?
Or just how did you develop the liking for Systema, and how did you involve yourself?
I was studying a lot of martial arts before I saw Systema,
Okay.
and mainly in sort of boxing and Kempo and Judo and outside that. I actually just went to a seminar that I've been invited to in Florida, and the guy who ended up being my teacher, Vladimir Vasilyev, had been invited to teach at that seminar, and I saw him, and after about 20 seconds realized where I personally had been going wrong. So I started training with him.
Right, and when you get into the street aspect, and now a lot of martial arts are glamorized, right? You know, there's sport BJJ, there's aerobic boxing and kickboxing. What keeps you steadily into the self-defense aspect?
I don't know if I'd put sport BJJ and aerobic kickboxing in the same.
Right, absolutely, right, right.
Category.
You're right.
I mean, if I took BJJ for example, I mean, obviously we have one of the world's best BJJ exponents right here in the school.
Sure.
I mean, it's an amazing art and incredible practitioners of it. But sport arts tend to fall down in street situations when you add a weapon or add a person. They are very good at dealing with one person in a slightly more controlled environment. And I'm not saying if a BJJ person who'd been training for a long time got into a fight and a weapon was produced or another person was added that they wouldn't win the fight. It's just they wouldn't be doing what they were trained for.
Right.
And that's the difference.
So what do you fear most out of a street situation? Is a bladed weapon something you fear the most? Because you know, previous to interviewing Higan Machado, I see you training in a private with a knife, primarily knife training.
Yeah.
Is that your biggest fear, or is it more of a baseball bat? What would be your least preferred entity to face in the street?
I mean, I prefer not to face a gun.
Right.
Because it's,
which is the ultimate, right?
Because it has distance, and you know, you can do it from a long distance away, or you know, even 5 or 6 feet away is a problem. But everything's a problem in the street. I mean, if the guy's got a weapon, if he hasn't got a weapon, can you tell if he's got a weapon? Are you halfway through the fight and a weapon comes out? How many buddies has he got? Are they hanging back? Are they in the fight? Why are you in the fight? I mean, if you're not fighting for your family or your country, what are you fighting for? I mean,
right.
So there's a lot of considerations in it.
Right. So, well, in this particular situation, if a knife fight occurs, or you don't have a knife and he has a knife,
yes,
would the ice pick or the pakal position be more dangerous, or is it the sock position?
It depends who's fighting. It depends who it is. I mean, if it's like you were talking about, one of your Edgar Salide with a knife, it doesn't matter what position he's in, he's going to get you. Right.
But for the ice pick or the pakal position, that's really more of a close end or a closer distance, right? Where with the sock position, that seems to be a little bit more of a longer range, where someone can stick and move, right?
It's true. But they can also draw you in with the pick position. So it's you know, I train for everything equally. I don't think of one thing as being more dangerous. I think of them all as being dangerous.
So when you do the knife tapping, is it universally one way for you? Like there's Pakiti Tersa likes to do.
There's no tapping. It's all instinctually based. There's no techniques. There's no form to it in the sense of that. Systema is purely learning how to understand your instincts and then apply knowledge to that.
I see.
Yeah.
When it comes to the martial arts out there, that's pretty close for a stand-up fight. Let's say no weapons are involved. Where do you rank Muay Thai versus boxing in necessity?
Okay, it's a tough. These are always tough questions.
Sure.
Because it's like, which Muay Thai fighter and which boxer? Are we talking Ali against, or are we talking a beginner against a professional, you know?
Let's say it's just a street brawler.
I mean, Muay Thai always has an advantage because you have distance. I mean, you're going to hack the guy's legs, and legs are very powerful weapons, and so distance in a street fight is always an advantage. But most people in a determined street fight will walk through those into the closer range where boxing becomes important. So, boxing is equally important. They're both important.
Right. Now, you have a lot of renowned fellow professors that attend this academy, such as Mark Denny, Kurudan Nasanto. Have you gotten to formulate your own method of stick fighting method?
Yes. I mean, the nice thing about Systema is that, look, obviously there's some great masters come here to share knowledge here. But the nice thing about Systema is that if anyone is doing it like me, they're doing it wrong. So everyone develops their own Systema out of their own instincts, out of their own body structure, their own form. And it's not that they're learning a certain type of technique and then trying to tailor that to themselves. It's literally they're learning out of their own instinctual patterns, their own ways of thinking, their own ways of moving.
So do you stick to a particular curriculum? Let's say, like the previous student that you had, he looked like he was anywhere from 5'5" to 5'7". Do you examine the body type, and then do you look at the student and go, oh, this is what I'm going to teach him as to start off? Or do you follow a certain fundamental pattern first?
It's more about teaching somebody fundamentals than it is teaching them patterns in any sense. I mean, there's only 4 fundamentals technically in Systema. I mean, learning how to breathe, how to relax, how to move, and how to keep your posture. And out of that, it's so hard because I've studied. I know these are. I always get these questions.
Sure.
And they're hard to answer. The hardest thing anybody asks me is, what is Systema? And I mean, I've trained a bunch of different martial arts where somebody asked me what boxing is. I could say, well, it's a pugilistic two-handed system that works mainly within this sort of mid-range zone, or if it was a Philippine martial art or something like that, you have some form of explanation to say, okay, it fits into this category.
Right.
And Systema it doesn't fit into those categories in that sense. Any class that you come to could range from multiple attackers to ground fighting to weapon fighting to security work to getting out of a car to anything, to just purely a breathing class. And Systema is like this one thing. And all you do every class is look at it from a different angle, so that whatever situation you get into, you start to adapt immediately to that situation. Would I teach a shorter fighter how to do long-range attacks? Yes, definitely, because they might need it. Would I teach a long-range fighter how to do short-range attacks or act like a shorter fighter? Yeah, definitely. But it would be up to them how they adapted how to use that.
Okay. There's a little bit of controversy in the UFC specifically out of the MMA branch. How do you feel about the oblique kick? Because a lot of fighters want to ban that.
Like the inside kick?
The stomp to the knee. A lot of fighters, specifically stand-up fighters, seem to think like the oblique kick is a little bit too much. What's your opinion on that kick?
Again, depends who's doing it. You watch John Jones do it and he'll snap someone's knee clean in half.
But everyone in the UFC is at a professional level, so even the rudimentary type fighters, right, can inflict a lot of damage.
Well, but they did take out things that did cause a lot of damage on the ground as well. You can't elbow somebody on the ground now.
Sure.
So they definitely have a precedent for taking out things that they consider to be too dangerous. And you got to remember, as much as these guys are highly professional, great fighters, incredible fighters, and they're coming up with new stuff all the time. There are certain things that are not allowed for certain reasons, and because it stops the fight and it stops the fighter from being able to fight again. And that's really yes, you want to find out who the best fighter is, but I guess it reminds me of actually a Philippine term that I heard, when two really good knife fighters fight, one dies there and the other one dies later.
Right, exactly.
So, do you really want that in the UFC where one guy trains all his, for 5 years to get into that position, then has his knee snapped in one move? when he could have had to have dealt with maybe round kicks, which probably wouldn't snap his knee.
Sure.
You know, or one oblique kick, which possibly would. So I think it's a good question whether it should be allowed or not in a sport environment.
Right.
In a street environment, you know.
Oh, of course, for the street, right? I mean, that's even just the Jeet Tech, where it's a non-oblique kick. I mean, that's great for keeping someone away.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to, so that's the stand-up banning in mixed martial arts, but a lot of trainers in the grappling arts feel really indifferent about the inverted heel hook.
It's again very dangerous, very quick.
So for sport, how do you feel about it?
For sport, I think, well, again, training for sport and training for competition are two different things again. Like people come to this gym and they train for sport in, you know, Higgins' jiu-jitsu class, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go into competition.
Right.
Which means that they could be in a position where the guy would pull that technique and fully go through with it. Whereas in an environment here, they could pull the technique and trust that the other person's going to allow them to tap out.
Right.
You know, and in a sport environment, that's one thing. But if that sport then progresses into competition, like full-on competition, that's when it becomes dangerous. So,
I see.
But to not practice that technique means that you wouldn't be aware of it in a real space, right? You know?
Right. So, like in
that's my opinion. I don't, you know.
No, absolutely. I'm here to get your opinion, which is great. You know, you would, because I would think someone who trains for survival in the street would think the inverse, would be like, oh yeah, of course you should apply stomp kicks and inverse heel hooks and everything, but apparently not for the sport aspect, which is great. I love that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, sport is a stable of fighters, and if your fighters aren't capable of fighting the next fight, then they can't put money on they can't, you know, put food on their plates. So, I mean, so if you make something so dangerous that they can only last one fight, then...
Right, and that's it. How important is it, we'll get back into the weaponry aspect now of your training. How important is it to train with padded sticks versus the philosophy of the Dog Brothers, where it is higher consciousness through harder contact?
I mean, my personal opinion I came from more of a street background, you know, I was a bouncer for a long time and did a lot of street fighting and stuff like that. And there's a huge difference between working with a real weapon and a training weapon, psychologically. And how do you allow yourself to stay calm and even to deal with hard weapons or hard things? Yeah, I prefer real weapons, or at least simulated real weapons.
Right, because there's a lot of robbery sometimes in between with Filipino stick and knife fighting, where you incorporate the beautiful looking witik, right?
Yeah.
You know, the fanning method. But really, I mean, even someone who's about 5'5", 120 pounds, you do a witik with adrenaline, it's just going to drive right through.
Yeah.
And drop you.
Oh, they'll ignore it, yeah, completely.
Especially with knife fighting, it's okay when it's padded, right?
Yeah.
But when Guru Mark Denny used to incorporate the shock system for Dog Brothers, then the braveness is removed and a lot less risky, right?
Bravery is a big aspect when it becomes real.
Right.
You know? But yeah, I mean, it again, from a teacher's point of view, when someone walks through the door of a martial art place, the hardest thing for them to do in any of the training they do is walk through that door the first day. That's the hardest thing they're ever going to do. And it's not your job then to scare them more, because everyone comes through that door scared. I did too.
Sure.
You know, they don't come in there, no matter what reason they say they came there, is they want to learn how to fight. And if the first thing you do is pull out real sticks and say, I'm going to beat the tar out of you now, you better escape, then you've instilled, even if they stay, they're more afraid than when they came.
Sure, it's a case of knowledge leads to overthinking sometimes, right?
Yes, and if, you know, maybe a padded stick might help them understand at least what something looks like in a real space.
Sure.
You know, and so they don't become necessarily afraid of it completely. But the reality of real weapons is very important. Lastly,
and I appreciate your time, and I know I'm holding you back from getting to places. Any stories you could share with us about like a street fight or a confrontation where you had to drop someone? Since you were a bouncer, we interviewed Boss Rutan about a couple of years ago. Any bouncer fight stories?
We had a lot of those. I mean, when I started I was 17 years old when I started doing it, you know.
Were you a hothead then?
No, I wasn't. I was completely the opposite. Actually, nobody even thought that I should be a bouncer. And that's probably what drove me into doing it. You know, I hated being told no.
To the contrary, right?
I guess learning about violence in the street was probably the most important thing from, you know, just learning the keys of how people start to change, what their cues are for throwing a punch. I mean, we were fighting. I mean, I was in a place that if a fight didn't start on the weekend, the bouncers started one because they were so ready to go. So we had a lot of confrontations there.
Any dog fight stories you could share?
One of the toughest ones was we had 40 guys against 6 of us at the end of the season, and half of them were a boxing club. That was an interesting evening.
How did that start?
There was just a few of us in the club, and basically it was all of them were on a party for the boxing coach. It was his birthday, and there were various families who we'd thrown all of them out over the summer, and they all came together in this one thing. And the first thing that started it actually was the boxing coach punched some guy in the face, and so I grabbed him and said, "Okay, I'm going to let that go," because I knew if I kicked him out, it was going to kick off. And he just kind of looked me up and down, walked around me, and punched the guy in the face again. So that's how it started. And I took him downstairs, and just as I had a hold of him, and he kind of got out of it, and he threw a hook, and it just clipped me. And as my head went one way, I saw a punch go over my shoulder from one of my friends and hit him in the face, and he just kind of spins and hits the wall, actually the Perspex glass, and as he goes down it, I see the toughest family that he taught, who he'd brought up, just watching him peel down this glass, and then they came in and started punching, and then eventually we managed to get control of the situation. But
6 of you managed to get control of?
Well, it was a riot. But we managed to actually get them all into a hallway at the bottom there, so they could only get like 3 or 4 abreast, and so it was just literally a numbers thing.
Battle of Thermopylae.
Exactly. We put them into a funnel, and then it was whoever was coming first was going to get it, and so those guys would back up, and the other guys would push from the back.
Wow.
It was like a wave, literally.
Had to maneuver in and out.
I managed to get up a few steps, and once you're a little bit higher than everyone else, it makes it easier.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.